Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. And welcome to this UK Cities event put on by Estates Gazette and GVA. When we were putting a wish list of speakers together for today's event, we aimed high, and I'm pleased to say we delivered on every count. That's a testament to the good nature of our speakers, of course, but more than anything, it reflects the seriousness of the topic we're here to discuss today. As the government seeks to deliver growth for the UK economy, investing in infrastructure is vital. It connects, it enables, and it unlocks further capital, or at least it did, and it should. We'll be talking about whether it will continue to do so in a moment. So I'm very pleased that we have the leaders of the UK's biggest cities here today to set out their vision for their regions and talk about the projects that will determine their future success. From transport to housing to regeneration and beyond. On my right, and sitting alphabetically by city, politically neutral, if nothing else me, Mike Whitby, leader of Birmingham City Council. Then Neil McLean, the chair of the Leeds City Region Local Enterprise Partnership. Sir Edward Lister, Deputy Mayor of London. Sir Howard Bernstein, Chief Executive of Manchester City Council. And to help cast the debate in the national context, we have Stephen Hollywood, Senior Director of GVA. I'll ask each of our city leaders to speak for 3 to 5 minutes about the compelling cases for their regions and how that will help deliver infrastructure growth across the UK. And Mike, I'll start with you.
Hello. Well, thank you, Damien, and good afternoon to you all. May I say I really do appreciate this opportunity to talk about what a city, clearly my city, can do, but also how our great cities within the United Kingdom have a major role to play. Within the United Kingdom, clearly there is some dysfunction in where prosperity lies and where the challenges have to be addressed. And it's imperative that the great provincial cities complement the United Kingdom's growth agenda. And to do that, clearly we have to attract infrastructure. We have to have sensible infrastructure, and around that we then have to attract sensible investment levels. And I would say, Damien, there are 3 titles, first of all, that lie beneath infrastructure investment, and that, first of all, is connectivity. The first essential for any global city, you have to be able to get there, and certainly from that city you have to get to the world. And we had a challenge in the in 2004-05 within the city of Birmingham. However, I'm pleased to say, and we've been saying it all day today, and we have done many MIPIM meetings, that in fact we've addressed now our major station. We've got a £684 million investment there that will draw 52 million people into the city centre. We clearly have invested almost £3 billion into our roads and pavements through a PFI. And I'm so pleased that the current government have recently announced HS2, and Justine Greening came to the City of Birmingham to say that she wants the City of Birmingham to be at the hub of the high-speed network, which is a £33 billion investment, but in particular for the City of Birmingham it probably will generate £1.5 billion worth of GVA, but most importantly it will create jobs. But the icing on the cake and the real challenge for the City of Birmingham and for any great city outside of the capital is that we need to reach the growth nodules of the world. And I'm pleased that we've got the Chief Executive of Birmingham Airport, because literally now we've raised the funding, the airport runway will be extended, and so we have now probably 7 major infrastructural connectivity projects, almost up to about £2.5 billion, that will clearly give us the connectivity any global city needs. However, Damien, it's not just that. The connectivity and the funding for that infrastructure development comes when you then have the right environment for good public-private sector partnerships. And the City of Birmingham has developed those. We have sophisticated partnerships. And only this morning, we announced our Sovereign Wealth Fund prospectus. We go all over the world. I promote the city throughout the world. And now the sovereign funds are wanting to invest money into the city. Underpinning the title of today's meeting, infrastructural projects. They are the areas where the liquidity lies. We can't clearly just go the old route where there's illiquidity. So we have our public sector largesse, aligned then to the activity around what we're doing, and then attracting private sector funding, but in particular in the City of Birmingham, sovereign wealth funds. And finally, Damien, then for all of that to really have any
essence in the psyche of people that are making decisions to come into the area, you then have to have a vision statement. And we launched our vision statement actually in MIPIM 2007-8. We won an international competition. It was the big city plan that was chosen in Valencia against 350 cities regeneration plans. And that gives a journey and road signs of what we want in infrastructural development, how that will then attract investment and how we'll share our assets. And tomorrow I'll be announcing that we've got a new, unique private public sector program where we will now give some land, some of our land. We own 40% of all Birmingham City's land. We will partner with a developer and a pension fund, and we'll be announcing we're going to build 400 new houses on top of the 1,000 new houses that we're building in conjunction with the private sector. So not only do we have the connectivity getting to and from, we're investing in connectivity and infrastructure fund to get us in and around the city of Birmingham as a capital of a region. Then clearly we want to give quality of life. And we benchmark ourselves against the Mercer quality of life. We've risen up the scales in the Mercer quality of life report. We moved last year 3 places, so we're doing extremely well there. And then the big vision, big city plan, gives a plan for everybody throughout the world, globally inquisitive, to find places to invest in and say, that's a city to invest in, that's where the infrastructure is required. We will get a return from that. But most importantly, Damon, whilst that engenders prosperity for Birmingham and the city region, it does what the United Kingdom must have. It grows the United Kingdom's economy, and cities are the drivers of nation states' wealth. So all of the city leaders here, everybody speaking on behalf of the city, understand that. What Britain shouldn't be is a one-stop shop. Clearly, we have one of the most powerful capitals in the world, but it shouldn't be a magnet that just draws all the life of the United Kingdom. We need to resuscitate through a whole range of opportunities so the great cities can really grow, but they must have this infrastructure development and funding. And I'd like to think there in a few minutes we've given to the audience, Damien, an oversight of how Birmingham wants to play its complementary role in driving forward prosperity, not only for our citizens, but for the great United Kingdom as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We'll come back to some of the detail of that in a moment, but Neil, we'll move straight on to Leeds.
Mike, thank you. I think there's inevitably going to be some repetition as we go across the panel here, so I'll cut some of the things I perhaps was going to say. I think from our perspective, we are a city region of 3 million people, over 100,000 businesses and a £52 billion economy. To make that economy work, we have to have movement within the economy. I'm certainly not ignoring the international or the global perspective there, but our economy in the Leeds City region should be far more substantial. It should carry more weight than it does. And one of the great issues for us has been a long-term lack of sensible investment. In addition to the lack of investment, where there has been investment, it's not been strategic and it's not been strategically focused. It's not been focused on actually the outcomes that the city region needs. It's more been focused on what central government has decided that the city region needs. And whilst in some instances that's right, in many instances it's not right. We've set a vision for the city region, much as Mike's explained, and that's to take our £52 billion economy to a point of really being a world-leading economy. We simply cannot do that without acceptable infrastructure. And what do we mean by acceptable infrastructure? That's local infrastructure, it's regional infrastructure, and it's national infrastructure. They have to go together. We actually have to be bound by a common purpose here, and that is to upgrade the UK's infrastructure to really unlock the potential of what we're talking about. And again, as Mike has said, investment in infrastructure cannot just stand alone. You have to look at what that leads to. It leads to jobs, it leads to a growth in the general economy, it leads to further spending in the economy, it leads to more attraction to inward investment. And all of those things give indirect benefit. If you look at the direct benefit that spending on infrastructure, even in our own city region, can bring, we estimate that sensible spending within the city region can actually produce up to £2 billion of additional GVA and can produce another 20,000 jobs. Massive changes that can be taken forward with relative simplicity. Some of the changes within the city region that we're talking about are simply improving flows between our communities. You know, we have 11 different local authorities within the city region. Flows of people around that city region, flows of business through that city region are absolutely vital. And with relatively limited spending, we can make a huge difference. But we're not just looking at our own city region. We have the electrification of the Transpennine line, and bringing Leeds and Manchester and their conurbations closer together creates a £100 billion economy. And looking across the north, if you look at the north generally, the strength of the economy, the size of that economy, and the potential of that combined economy is simply huge. And if you're an international investor, you don't actually think about that cities 40 miles apart should be operating separately. You should be looking at a north regional economy. And both within the city region, but across the north and through the Northern Hub, the investment in the Northern Hub, which will improve transport between Newcastle, Leeds and Manchester, you're there talking about a £4 billion addition to GVA. So it's a real unlocker of potential. It's an unblocker of growth. And that level of investment can provide huge return. And just one further point on that return. If we can unlock some of the northern economies, it's not just about direct GVA, it is about actually putting money back into the exchequer. Because if we can take people into employment through many of these transport schemes, they go off the national budget, they create wealth, they pay tax, and within a relatively short period, we move from being a consumer in the economy to a real contributor to the economy. Thank you.
Neil, thank you. Ed, London.
Well, thank you very much. The situation in London is very similar to the other two speakers, and I suspect we're all going to be singing a rather similar song. But the fact remains that in London, we are looking with our London plan to growth by 2031 to increase the population to 8.6 million. Now that will surpass our population back in 1939, which was 8.4 billion. That increase is roughly the same as rebuilding northwest London all over again, just to put it into perspective. And it's that kind of massive building programme that we require. It's also about another 600,000 jobs being created in London. So these are very ambitious targets which we have to meet because the pressure is on us. So how are we going to deal with some of these things? Well, the Mayor has set out a series of major transport infrastructure schemes. We're investing currently between now and 2020 £15 billion on transport infrastructure. That will increase our transport by about 30% capacity. 10% capacity will be increased by Crossrail alone, which is a major scheme already underway, which is going to transform east to west communications. And we're transforming north-south communications through Thameslink, which is nearing completion at the moment, and the only slight hold-up is rebuilding London Bridge Station, a pretty major exercise. But these are the big infrastructure changes. But we're more ambitious than that. We actually believe that we need complete control over the overland rail as well, as far as it's concerned in London. And I suspect that could be a claim other people will make on this platform. And we're currently bidding with the Department of Transport to take over some of the North London lines and also some of the South East lines when their franchises come up due. Why do we want to do that? Because we have got to get greater usage out of that rail network to feed the central part of London. And we have proved by some of the overground lines that we have taken over, that if you can convert them from being a train every 30 minutes to being a train every 10 minutes, the passengers come. And if you improve the security and look and feel of the stations, the passengers come. And it's all about providing a reliable rail system. So that for us is a major priority, and it's our big ask of government. The airport is another major infrastructure issue for us. We desperately need a new hub airport in London, and the Mayor's ambition is for that to be built to the east of London in the estuary. We need a 24/7 airport which can connect us to all the major international markets in the world. And the investment in that is colossal. But we don't believe that it's about money, because we're quite confident that the money can be raised. We believe it is about political will and ambition and commitment, and that's what we're all about. Talking of infrastructure, we're fortunate in having quite massive infrastructure investments by some of the big sovereign funds in London, but that remains, like the others, a priority for us. And that's a major role for the Mayor of the city to go out there and entice those people to come in and get those schemes off the ground. And I just suggest you come and have a look at London, our pavilion, and you can see the map of the central part of London, and you can see some of the great buildings that are going up with pretty massive foreign investment coming into them. But what's good for London is also, I would suggest, actually good for the rest of the country. We're commissioning, for example, a new London Red double-decker bus. We've got the first 8 of them on the streets of London at the moment. They're still going through their paces, but if they're successful, and I'm sure they're going to be, we'll be buying many hundreds, if not thousands of them. What's important about that is that it's providing large numbers of jobs in Northern Ireland, because those buses are built in Northern Ireland and will be shipped to London. It's like when we make changes to the rail network with TfL and we start expanding the underground, as we have been, and we buy more carriages and everything else that comes from Derby. Some of the big construction projects we've got in central London that have moved away from the wet trades into precast and pre-designed systems are coming from the north of England. We are providing lots of employment elsewhere in the country. So I do suggest that what we do is actually of great relevance to other people and does help other people's prosperity. But I do also believe that our challenges are the same challenges that we all face on the platform.
Thank you, Ed. Howard in Manchester.
Well, I'm gratified for the acknowledgement that places outside London exist. And I thought you were going to send us a few red buses up at one step. I think the starting point for this debate really is what Mike and the chap from Leeds said, really. It starts off by what sort of economy we want to create here in the UK. I'm an absolute passionate advocate of London. London's growth and development is fundamental to the growth of the UK. I've said that publicly for many, many years. But equally, if we're going to have a rebalanced economy, we've got to see a greater acknowledgement at the centre about the role and functioning of cities. I just want to make 3 points which I think are particularly relevant in the context about how you drive an infrastructure agenda. First of all, it's about economic geography. We talk too much about individual cities. What we don't do enough is talk about what actually constitutes a labour market which underpins the efficient and effective operation of those cities. In Greater Manchester, we have 10 individual local authorities which constitute our labour market. We've invested enormous time and energy in driving a new approach to governance, which I think provides a much stronger way of coordinating planning, transport, housing and economic development strategies. That for me is an absolute must in terms of moving forward. The second thing inevitably is about funding. We've invested something like £1.5 billion of our own money in driving our transport planning and our transport delivery over the last few years. We're also in an advanced stage of negotiation with government around a tax increment finance scheme. And what all of that, I think, genuinely offers is the opportunity to make critical linkages between the way in which we invest for transport, the way we actually secure maximum economic outcomes, and more importantly, the ability of local government in its entirety to capture the benefits of that growth going forward, so that only are they incentivized to continue to invest, they're able to actually drive their economies forward. The other point for me is investment models, a point which Mike in particular raised. Local government has got to become a lot smarter in the way in which it deploys what limited funding it has at its disposal, recognising we're all going to be living in a ever-challenging fiscal environment for some years to come. We therefore need to acknowledge the frailties of the market, the inability to access debt in particular at affordable prices, and what we have to be doing, I think, is actually develop our own investment models where the public resources we can gather together are able to be deployed to support equity and debt investment alongside the private sector. Certainly the work that we've done on our evergreen funding model, which was launched last week, is giving me increasing confidence that not only is that the way that cities can actually stay ahead of the game, but more particularly provide the scalable propositions for the investment community to join us. And I'm very confident that they will in Greater Manchester, to a point where over the next few years we'll be talking about a fund of well in excess of 500 million.
Thank you, Howard, and thank you all for compelling, cogent cases. Stephen, just before I come to you, I was struck particularly by something that Neil said, although all the panellists touched on it. We have to be bound together by a common purpose, and there was a mixture in each of those cases. There was a mixture of the local and the national picture. But hearing all of that, does that add up to a national infrastructure plan, or is the friendly competition that we experience perhaps going to stand in the way?
That's an excellent question, Damien. I was quite taken by the comment about common purpose as well, because that's, I think, what we all need to have in terms of delivery of national infrastructure. I think what's very heartening is to hear from the city leaders what they're actually doing in their regions, and I think it's absolutely superb what you are doing and the partnerships that you're creating within those regions. But I think what we also have to remember is that there was a survey done last year by the World Economic Forum, and it showed that in terms of the UK, we were something like 33rd in terms of the attractiveness of the quality of our infrastructure to business people all over the world, and we're what, the 6th or 7th largest economy. It's absolutely critical, this issue of infrastructure. But it has to be bottom-up to a degree. But my view is that there needs to be a very strong national framework as well for delivery of infrastructure. And that has to come essentially from government, because infrastructure drives our economies at regional and national level, and infrastructure will bring those, if you like, those knowledge-intensive industries that we actually need in all of our cities. And it seems to me that central government has an absolutely critical role here, obviously. And one is to make the connections between the things that these guys are all doing. I think that's absolutely fundamental. But we need to have a continuing pipeline, I think, of projects coming forward. I think the National Infrastructure Plan, I think, which is in its second version, is starting to show how that can be done and how planning and delivery can take place. But I think also what we need to do is to ensure that the alignment of policies takes place. That's at national and regional levels in relation to those national infrastructure schemes. And I think the comment was made earlier on about fundability. I mean, funding is absolutely critical. I think I read in the Times on the way over here the other day that government is now looking at the National Infrastructure Bank, which I think that sort of thing is absolutely critical in terms of delivering infrastructure on a national level. And I think the final point to make is that the relationship between central government and local government is changing. We're going to see more devolution of powers through the Local Government Finance Act, which I think is very important. I think the City Deals initiative is very important. And my belief is that the cities need to be given the opportunity and the space to to deliver on the infrastructure that they need to do, but government actually needs to create the regulatory framework within which it can operate and needs to allow the decision making to be taken at those regional levels. I think it's absolutely critical. So government acts as the glue between all of the work that the city leaders are doing. I think that's very, very important. And I think that final point I would make, Damien, is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, is it? All of the cities here are very different. They all have different characteristics. They all have different approaches. So we have to have bespoke policies to take the infrastructure forward. And it's government's job to make sure that collaboration happens. And I'd love to see more collaboration, I think, between the cities in order to deliver that infrastructure. HS2 is a very good example. London to Birmingham, then to Manchester, then further north. I think the cities have got to work together much more closely, maybe than they have done in the past, in order to maximise the benefits for UK PLC.
Thank you, Stephen. I'll stop you there, Mike. And if I can come to you in a second, we'll take responses. But it strikes me that this ultimately comes down to finance and politics, and they often make fairly unhappy bedfellows. And I'd like to come on to finance in some detail. But Ed, if I can just start with you. Stephen talked about it, and each of you touched on it in your own way. Do you think that that central government perhaps obstructs more than it enables?
No, I think provided, there is a proviso on this, that they do give us the freedoms that we all require and need to develop new funding models. It's quite clear.
Can you pick up your microphone?
Sorry. It is absolutely clear, and I think we've shown this actually with the Crossrail project, which we've got on at the moment. That's a project which in its totality is costing 14 billion. A third of that is coming from government. A third of it is coming from a business rate supplement on London businesses, and a third of it's coming from CILs. I would suggest to you that that is the sort of pattern we're going to have in the future. Not necessarily any of those things, but it will be mixtures like this. We're going to have to be much more inventive, and government's got to give us the freedom to be inventive, to devise new ways of raising the cash.
Okay, and so Howard, you talked there about developing, local authorities developing their own investment models. What's Manchester's model?
Well, it's a mix really, but our investment model is where 10 individual local authorities club together effectively and agreed for over a 10-year period to align funding streams, rate increases in order to create an investment capability of £1.5 billion, which is now being invested in transport. That will grow our business base. It will manifest itself in increased business rates going forward. We want the capacity to capture that growth, which we can then continue to reinvest in our infrastructure. What that does is reinforce the absolute requirement only to support those interventions which drive growth. And therefore, the ability to make difficult decisions, to prioritise, to have the methodological base to underpin that appraisal process is absolutely critical going forward. Now that won't work inevitably for all our interventions, so therefore we are working through the development of new models. One announced last week, initial capital of 100 million, which is designed specifically at the market to actually plug the gap for mezzanine finance, which we know at the present time can be, certainly in places like Manchester, I would suggest in other provincial cities, can be very, very difficult to access at affordable prices. And that is going to have to be a continuing process of how we examine the pattern of market behaviour and be prepared to intervene to support our economies going forward.
And Mike, you talked about £684 million being invested in New Street Station, I think. How's that being paid for?
A judicious mix, yeah. Well, first of all, I'd just like to address something that Stephen said about how cities work together. One of the reasons why tax incremental finance, which is going to be certainly a new way that cities will lever in investment and through their regeneration plans borrow against the uplift on the business rate was advocated initially as an accelerated development zone, but is an American idea, and the government has now chosen it, is because 7 major cities, core cities, came together and we lobbied with a single voice, because clearly the funding mechanisms to actually underpin infrastructure are essential. Now, how did we get our £684 million? Let me just tell you, Damien, and everybody in this room, it was torturous. One of the reasons why Britain is held back, and especially outside of the capital, is the long-winded way it takes to draw down funding from the Treasury towards infrastructural projects. It is laborious. We had to go through 4 strategic departments, and we ended up having to convince the Treasury. I just wish they'd have allowed us to just make our pitch to the Treasury, because clearly the government has to have cost-benefit ratios, and if you have too many formulas around cost-benefit ratios, it takes a long time. New Street Station was built in 1966 to actually accommodate 16 million passengers. It's now breaking at the seams. 33 million people come into it, and it will be released as a new station and immediately attract 52 million people. And in addition to Moore Street and the other station, we will literally then bring the people into the city that will underpin the private public sector partnerships that will build the infrastructure that 100 million people or more coming into our city need. However, it was torturous. So we went through AWM, we got £100 million, £139 million from Centro, City Council through its transport levy and its regional partners, £100 million, and then the private sector came in and they gave about £100 million. Torturous, let me tell you. It took far too long. If you go to China and India and the competing cities of the world, they can sort that out within a year and start building it. We need to wake up in the United Kingdom, we really do.
Thank you. And Neil, I came to you last very deliberately because you're at the heart of this. Local enterprise partnerships, can they deliver everything that they perhaps promise? Is it what it says on the tin?
I'm not sure we can deliver everything that the government would like us to deliver at the moment, I have to say, because they seem to be expecting us to deliver most things. I do think, however, there is a real change going on. We were with government yesterday negotiating on the city deals process, and one of our very major asks is in terms of creating a different playing field perhaps on transport. We, like Manchester, the West Yorkshire authorities, have targeted £1 billion transport fund. Negotiations are going on that at the moment. We're looking to central government to effectively give us more localised appraisal structures, and again we're developing, following in many cases the way Manchester have done this, an appraisal model. Government are very open at the moment to letting, whether it's cities, whether it's LEPs, appropriate authorities, have more freedom and more access to finance. The quid pro quo for that is that local authorities have to be more creative, they have to be brave, they have to make decisions, they've got to be willing to actually positively invest. They've got to ask the business community through precepts, etc., to come into this fund, SILs, TIFs, etc. These can all be brought together, and it's really now a question of taking the freedoms that I think are available, aggregating the funds, leveraging off them, and you've then really got the ability to make some genuine step changes to our infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. I'll take some questions from the floor in the moment, so there's a microphone going around, so do please get ready to put up your hands. But Stephen, one last question for you before I do take some questions. Outside, I'll phrase this flippantly, but it underscores a serious point. There's the double-height Qatari stand there, and the Russian pavilion next to it, and then London. And they all seem quite close together. Are international investors only interested in London, or are they beginning to see the advantages of investing in UK regions?
Very, very interesting question, I think. I mean, I think what we've got to understand, I think, is that London is, in terms of world cities, 1, 2, whichever way, Edward, you'd like to look at that. So therefore, it is a unique offer, and that's absolutely absolutely the case. I think what we need to do, we need to promote our regional cities in the way the city leaders have been describing. But, you know, there are huge benefits, of course, from infrastructure to be gained within those regional cities. And I think that, you know, we've got to almost use that London halo effect as much as anything else in order to secure investment, if you like, outside the M25. There have been some successes in all of the cities, but I think we need to see a lot more of that. And I do think it does mean that we need to see people going from the cities, major cities in the UK, out to the likes of China, Hong Kong, and other major investors, which I know is happening. I think Mike spoke earlier on about sovereign wealth funds and the work that you've been doing there, and hopefully we'll see some success out of that. But it's about actually getting up, going out, being proactive, and making sure that these other investors understand the benefits of coming to our regions. At the end of the day, if everything goes to London, you know, that's not going to work for UK PLC. They have to come out to our regional cities, and it's vital that we do that as a nation.
Okay, thank you. Right, questions from the floor? None at all. I have plenty. I'll just carry on. I also have some questions. I asked the Twitter sphere for some questions earlier, so I'll come to those in a moment. HS2, Mike. We perhaps haven't talked about that enough today. How important is that? Is it necessary? Is it necessary for Birmingham? Might it benefit London more?
Well, I see HS2 ultimately as something that will help all of the regions, not just London and Birmingham, although we will be the immediate beneficiaries always. It brings the United Kingdom closer together. It means we can trade, we can actually promote the United Kingdom as a total asset. We don't want an underperforming asset. We don't want part of the asset performing extremely well that has clearly had the advantage of having the citadel of power, the monarchy and everything else to attract it and clearly do well. We want not necessarily to reside beneath a halo of London. The cities can grow, but there needs to be an equitable amount of infrastructure funding. Then you need to look at the cost-benefit ratios, and then you need to look at the virtues of those regions. We have an intellectual reservoir, we have a quality of life, we have all of the assets that international investors are looking for. So what we need to do as United Kingdom is promote the United Kingdom. What will then HS2 do? It will then enable people to go all around the United Kingdom at a level and at a speed and add the capacity, because HS2 is not just about speed, by the way, it's about increased capacity. It's about the rail links literally groaning under the growth level and usage of rail. But what it will then do, Birmingham Airport at the moment, 10 million passengers. We will grow Birmingham Airport up to 36 million passengers with hardly any challenge to the public purse. That's cost-benefit ratio. That's what the government will reflect upon. It needs to look at its regional aviation policy. Again, let's look at our regions. Let's look at their connectivity. So I think that fundamentally we will draw from London some of the investment there, because the cost-benefit ratios of Birmingham and what we can offer almost everything that London has, probably not at the same mass level, but almost everything. And people will then be able to come into the United Kingdom, move around it and make a choice. We won't be a competitor to London. Actually, we will actually say to the world, the United Kingdom has a range of options, you choose them, but they've all got modern infrastructure. It's essential that the United Kingdom has modern infrastructure to compete against everybody else. HS2 will be part of that, links our airport, we will grow that airport. That will be an asset to the United Kingdom. 36 million passengers going out of an airport, and if clearly people from the one part of London that can't get into Heathrow at the moment too easily want to come up to Birmingham, they're welcome.
Is there a risk that that it will do more for London's economy than it would for Birmingham's economy as it becomes within commutable distance, doesn't it?
Damien, city leadership is about having confidence and understanding cachet. We have a cachet. It's marketable. We had 33 million people visit Birmingham last year. The United Kingdom had a decrease of tourist visits of -5. Birmingham was one of the few places in the United Kingdom to still increase the number of people to visit it. I go to China, the Middle East and India every year. We're advising Abu Dhabi and whole ranges of the Middle East on how to grow their urban areas. Birmingham has a reputation, as I know Howard, Manchester does, and all the other great cities do. We're out there selling our cities, but we're not selling our cities in competition to London. We're adding value to the United Kingdom. This is a United Kingdom debate underpinned by the credibility of all its assets, and those are their great cities.
Okay, and Ed, on the flip side, London has and is growing tremendously. Does that, if these regions, if the areas that you're surrounded by start to attract some of that overseas investment, will that dilute London's success?
No, I don't think it will, and I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think the real way to look at this is that obviously we will each be battling for our own city. That's natural. But the fact is, if we don't get it in London, I very much hope it goes to Birmingham or Manchester or Leeds. I don't really mind as long as it goes somewhere, and that's what we're really about, and that's the message we're putting out there. And I mean, we're all in a slightly different place, and that point's been made already. And we've got to look at what we're up against. I mean, I've got to tell you, I'm more worried about what happens in New York or what happens in Singapore than I am anywhere else, because that's where we are likely to lose trade and lose business, lose people too. But I'm not worried if they go to Manchester, as long as they're in the UK.
I agree with you.
Okay, and Howard, is that the same for you? Do you see Manchester first and the UK second? And are you also in competition with your fellow panellists here?
At the margin, I guess we are really. I think you've raised things about high-speed rail. I think high-speed rail only delivers the maximum impact when we're talking about a national high-speed rail system. And I think one of the most important aspects of this government's approach has been the way in which it has embraced high-speed rail as a fundamental part of their long-term transport planning, which is very much welcomed where I come from. The only caveat I would enter into, we shouldn't allow high-speed rail to detract us from some of the more shorter-term investment decisions we actually need to make in order to continue to drive our infrastructure forward. And I'm thinking particularly about the Northern Rail Hub. Any of us who understand the Northern Rail Hub is absolutely central to unlocking capacity constraints, which is currently actually reducing our effectiveness, I suspect, to the effectiveness of Leeds, as well as South Yorkshire's effectiveness in accessing their labour market. So that's a very important part going forward. Just one other point, really. We keep talking about how we're all competing for investment from abroad, and of course at one level we are. Some of us are seeing that, and others have got to a little bit of go before we get even more. One of the biggest critical challenges we have to face as a nation is how the UK plays a more influential role in tackling the trading fortunes of this country going forward. When you actually look at any diagnosis about the emerging, growing economies, we've got to be a lot smarter in this country in terms of how we trade with Russia, how we trade with China and the Far East. And that, in my view, will be as big an influence on the growth and development of our cities as they will be on how much inward investment we can deliver.
And who's the we in that? We have to be smarter.
I think as a nation, I've seen analysis over the past few years which is actually frightening when you actually look at the next decade forecasts in terms of growth, how the UK and Europe almost become a blip on a plan in comparison with China, with comparison with some of the other emerging and growing economies. We spend our time debating Greece when in every 11 weeks China's creating another Greece. And what we have to do fundamentally is start to be much more thoughtful and sophisticated as a nation about how we exploit some of the inherent assets of this country around knowledge, around science, around research, in order to drive the long-term trading fortunes of this country, which in turn will influence a lot of the investment streams, a lot of the investment strategies which we all want to capture.
Okay, in the last couple of minutes, I'll just turn to Twitter for a couple of questions, some serious, some less serious. Neil, I'll start with you. What role does the quality of the built environment play in attracting people to live and work in cities?
Oh, well, it's essential, isn't it? We are a relatively sophisticated economy with a relatively sophisticated population. And in terms of the quality of the environment around them, that is something that people are alive to. It's something that attracts people. In our city region, we've got some fantastic cities, but we've got some, it's a wonderful area to live in as well. And the combination of the built environment and the rural environment is a massive offer in most of our cities and city regions, and is hugely important.
And Ed, perhaps slightly less seriously, are cable cars a viable answer to challenges faced in providing low-cost, effective urban transport?
Well, firstly, it's better than the bus, and it is actually the equivalent of about 20 buses. So it is quite a valuable asset in that sense. It actually linked to two parts of London, the Royals, with the Greenwich Peninsula, two growth areas for us, major growth areas for us. We actually need better transport links across the river. That's an infrastructure scheme which we're working on, and it will take many years. From concept to completion, the cable car's taken under 2 years. And I think it's a quick and easy way of getting something in place quickly. It's heavily sponsored, so it's not been an expensive operation. And it also, on a more serious note, it's also one of those attractive things we're all putting into our cities, which help draw people in and want to come and look and come and spend some time and have a bit of fun. And you've got to have some of that in a city.
Okay, and lastly, briefly, and I won't blame Twitter for this, but if I were to put this question to Ed, I'm sure he'd talk about the Olympics. If I were to put it to Howard, I know what he'd talk about, so I won't give him that platform. But Mike, how important is sport, and specifically football, in all of this?
Why ask him about football?
Exactly.
Let me say, it's essential. I go around the world promoting the city, and literally I'm amazed wherever I go. There are one or two football teams that are mentioned no matter where you go, and that underpins the brand. Birmingham has invested heavily in art, sport and culture. We probably, well, I know over the last 14 years, ironically enough, most people won't realise this, mainly because it isn't a football sport, but we've actually hosted more European, international, world sporting events in the United Kingdom in the last 14 years in Birmingham. It's gymnastics, it's table tennis, it's badminton. It's why the Jamaicans have chosen Birmingham to train for the Olympics. It's why the Americans have come to Birmingham and train, for the Olympics. It's why Voice of America last week said the track city of the United Kingdom is Birmingham. But most people know, dare I say it, one or two football teams, which we all know, and they are powerful. So I'm chivvying along my local teams, Aston Villa and Birmingham, but nevertheless there are on this panel people that have football teams of global preeminence, and I wish they'd been Birmingham.
I'll take no further comments. I'm afraid I have to wrap it up there. I hope you've all been downloading your digital dailies from Estates Gazette on web or the iPad, and there will be an account of this debate in tomorrow's. But if you'd just like to join me in thanking our panellists. Thank you.